The Dragon's Last Roar, a China-Taiwan War and the Twilight of Communism. The year is 2027. The embers of global communism, once a raging inferno, flicker weakly. The Soviet Union, the monolithic giant, crumbled decades ago. Yet, in the heart of Asia, a defiant dragon stirs, China, the last bastion of a fading ideology. Across the Taiwan Strait, a lone island democracy stands defiant, a thorn in the side of the communist giant. Tensions simmer, fueled by nationalist fervor and historical grievances. Then, a spark ignites the tinderbox, plunging the region into a conflict that could reshape the global order and mark the final, desperate struggle of the communist movement. The road to war, a tangled web of history and geopolitics. The seeds of conflict were sown long ago. The Chinese Civil War, a brutal struggle between the nationalists and the communists, ended with the nationalists retreating to Taiwan in 1949. China, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, never relinquished its claim over the island, viewing it as a renegade province awaiting reunification. Taiwan, meanwhile, flourished as a democracy, becoming a technological and economic powerhouse. The catalyst, a spark ignites the powder keg. The specific trigger for the war remains shrouded in the fog of history books. Perhaps it's a Taiwanese politician's official visit to a US warship, a misinterpreted military exercise, or a brazen cyber attack. Regardless of the catalyst, tensions escalate rapidly. China conducts large-scale military drills near the Taiwan Strait, while the US, bound by the Taiwan Relations Act, increases its military presence in the region. International diplomacy fails to quell the rising tide of nationalism on both sides. The initial blitz, a desperate gamble. China, convinced of its technological and military superiority, launches a surprise attack. Hundreds of missiles rain down on Taiwanese military installations, airfields, and critical infrastructure. Amphibious assaults target strategic coastal cities, aiming to establish a foothold on the island. Taiwan's fierce resistance, asymmetric warfare and David versus Goliath. Despite the initial onslaught, Taiwan fights back with surprising ferocity. Years of preparing for a potential invasion pay off. Taiwanese forces, equipped with advanced weaponry provided by the US and trained in asymmetric warfare tactics, turn cities into battlegrounds. The mountainous terrain of Taiwan's interior becomes a graveyard for Chinese armor. The international stage, a proxy war and shifting alliances. The war becomes a global flashpoint. The US, despite its policy of strategic ambiguity, is drawn into the conflict. Aided by its allies, it enforces a naval blockade on China, crippling its resupply efforts. This escalates tensions further, raising the specter of a wider US-China war. The information war, propaganda and hacking in the digital age. Both sides engage in a fierce cyber warfare battle. China attempts to cripple Taiwan's critical infrastructure and disrupt its communication networks. Taiwan counters with cyber attacks aimed at disrupting Chinese military operations and logistics. Information warfare takes center stage, with each side flooding the media with propaganda to shape public opinion domestically and internationally. The human cost, a devastating humanitarian crisis. The war is a brutal affair. Civilian casualties are high on both sides. Cities are reduced to rubble from heavy artillery bombardment and urban warfare. Millions flee the island as refugees, creating a regional humanitarian crisis. The world watches in horror as the last embers of global communism threaten to engulf an entire nation in flames. The ghost of communism, a desperate attempt to revive a dying ideology. The Chinese leadership frames the war as a righteous struggle to reunify the motherland and defend its territorial integrity. However, some analysts see it as a last-ditch effort to revive a fading ideology. By forcefully taking Taiwan, China hopes to reassert its dominance in the region and project itself as a powerful communist state on the world stage. The Dragon's Dilemma, a stalemate and the high cost of victory. Even if China achieves initial territorial gains, occupying and controlling all of Taiwan proves a far more arduous task. Taiwanese forces, fueled by a strong sense of national identity, engage in a protracted guerrilla war, inflicting heavy casualties on the Chinese occupation forces. The longer the war drags on, the higher the cost becomes for China, both economically and in terms of international isolation. The endgame: negotiations, ceasefire, and an uncertain future. As the human cost mounts and the international pressure intensifies, both sides are forced to the negotiating table. A fragile ceasefire is established, leaving Taiwan with a bruised but unbroken democracy and China facing a Pyrrhic victory, its reputation tarnished and its economic and military might depleted. The global ramifications: a new world order and the end of an era, continued. The US, having emerged as a key player in the conflict, strengthens its alliances in the Asia-Pacific region. This could lead to the formation of a new security bloc aimed at countering China's growing influence. The end of communism, a waning ideology and a resurgent democracy. The war in Taiwan serves as a final, desperate gasp for communism. The world witnesses the ideology's failure to deliver prosperity or security. This could lead to a further decline of communist parties around the globe, as people lose faith in their outdated ideology. Taiwan's resilience, a beacon of democracy. Taiwan's fierce resistance against a communist superpower captures the imagination of the world. It emerges from the war as a symbol of resilience and a champion of democracy. This could inspire other nations struggling with authoritarian regimes. Economic disruption and a shifting landscape. The war disrupts global trade and supply chains, leading to a period of economic instability. China's isolation could lead to a diversification of trade routes and a shift in economic power towards other Asian nations. A long road to recovery, rebuilding lives and infrastructure. The physical and psychological scars of the war will take years to heal. Rebuilding infrastructure, resettling displaced populations, and addressing the trauma of war will be a long and arduous process for both Taiwan and China. A new era of uncertainty, a world without blocks. The bipolar world order of the Cold War is long gone. The China-Taiwan War ushers in a new era of uncertainty, with a multipolar world order taking shape. New alliances will form, and new power players will emerge. Lessons learned: a call for dialogue and peaceful resolution. The war serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unresolved conflicts. It highlights the importance of diplomacy, peaceful conflict resolution, and respect for national sovereignty. A cautionary tale for the future. The China-Taiwan War is not just a historical event, it's a cautionary tale for the future. It serves as a reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present danger of unresolved historical grievances escalating into devastating conflicts. The world must learn from the mistakes of the past and work towards a future where dialogue and cooperation prevail over aggression and violence. The war may be over, but the future of the region, and indeed the world, remains uncertain. Will the ashes of the conflict give rise to a new era of cooperation and prosperity, or will the embers of hostility continue to smolder, threatening to engulf the world in another global conflict? Only time will tell. It is important to note that this is a hypothetical scenario. The actual course of events in a China-Taiwan war would depend on a complex interplay of factors, including the nature of the conflict, the international response, and the resilience of the Taiwanese people.